Last night, Riot added over 70 new cards to the website, which means we finally have all of Set 1 Origins spoiled and available. That means today you can start playing Riftbound knowing the full set. Now, with over 70 cards, I didn't want to do a full Riftbound recap with, well, all of them. So what I did for today's video is just highlight the top 2 for each of the domains or colors. And these aren't necessarily the best ones, but maybe more the most interesting, in my opinion, that could have a overall impact on kind of what we thought the meta was, but also future metas. I think there's some cards in here that really shed some light on what set 2 is going to hold. So with that out of the way, let's dive into these cards. So up first, we do gotta give a bit of an honorable mention, as it were, to Party Favors, a 3 energy spell. You can choose cards or runes, and then for each player that chooses cards, you and that player draw a card, and then for runes, you and that player get to channel 1 rune exhausted. This is just a really fun multiplayer style of card, and we do know that Riftbound is gonna have a little bit of a multiplayer focus, at be it more a casual level, but you have the ability to play either, 2v2, free for all, what have you. And I'm suspecting that in the future we'll either have side events or just proper LGS level support for more of these casual formats of just getting people together and playing in another way, right? I know that everyone's more focused on, especially if you've been following this channel for a while, all about that 1v1, all about the competitive play, which is totally fine as well. But I think it is very important to see that they are acknowledging this up front and giving us such a fun card like Party Favors. Now, you don't ever want to see like 10 of these types of cards in a set, but I think 1 to 2 cards per set is just the very nice amount because, well, you never really want to run this in a more competitive 1v1 setting, but does find itself a home very well in a 4-player free-for-all. So very excited to see where that card lands. But getting into more of the interesting competitive cards, we have Brynhir Thundersong, a 6 energy, 5 might unit from Fury. When you play me, opponents can't play cards this turn. This could go crazy 2 very different ways. We have to wait and see where the rest of the set is going to land from a deck building perspective. Again, I am going into this blind first review, what have you, but immediately what comes to mind for me is either going to be Volibear as a kind of a given in this regard, because it does shut your opponent down from accelerating their board too much. It is a 5 might card, so you are going to channel off of it, and it's just something that can buy you an extra turn when you need it. On the other hand, for the more aggressive strategies, if you know that your opponent spent their turn trying to hold up some runes for either a counter spell or some type of buff, like they're going against a Calm Legend, if they held up 4 runes and you suddenly just slam this down, you say, well, you were probably going to try to save your battlefield, and now I can just conquer and run it over instead because you are not allowed to play any buffs, as it were. So very curious to see where this lands. It might be more of a sideboard card for more aggressive strategies in that regard, because it's going to do very well right into the more calm style of Legends. But for Volibear, I'll have to see, because we got a lot of new dragons, by the way. I won't go into that too much, but Volibear got a lot of lower to the ground cards and like the more honest style of ramp strategies, so I could see Thundersong making a very big impact there, again, just to slow down the game so that you have time to ramp in to your bigger strategies. So Thundersong definitely going to be a interesting one. Now, one that might not seem all that impressive, and I had a couple different cards for this slot. I just wasn't sure if I wanted to use this or the Spellbook or the Tryndamere spell, but we have Iron Ballista, a 3 energy gear that does enter exhausted, but deal 2 to a unit at a battlefield. This is great to go into Kaisa, get your damage spells just a little bit more oomph when you really need them. This could also be good in some more aggressive strategies that if you just want to save your assault characters and you need a little bit more pushing power, then you can combo those units with this card in particular, right? We think about the Phoenix kind of being a staple for a lot of people and just a high assault unit that can keep coming back. Well, Iron Ballista can definitely help you get that little bit of extra might advantage. And notably, when you do damage like this outside of combat, you do have that damage stick for the turn, so you can then continue to combo with other effects or again crash into the battlefield as needed. So there was also a lot of gear removal or additional gears that were available to every domain. So I do think it'll be interesting to see how much gear takes a focus in set 1. I do think there's a lot of playable gear. Obviously, Aurora just being the one I think that the most eyes are on. But with a lot of this other gear removal or other decks wanting to play gear, I think that having more interaction with gear overall is going to be really nice and something a lot of players are looking forward to splashing in their decks, or again in maybe sideboards, just because gear will be everywhere. So Iron Ballista, again, while not being the most exciting card perhaps for a lot of the reveals that were left, I wanted to pull out 2 for each domain, and I do think this one can be very interesting. Now, the one that is going to just piss me off the most, if I'm being honest, is Mystic Reversal for 4 energy and 3 power, and that is a lot of power, to be fair, but gain control of a spell, you may make new choices for it. This is just 2 for 1 your opponent the card. If they play a key removal, you say, nope, I'm going to kill your guy instead. They play a key buff, you say, nope, I'm going to buff my guy and just wipe your battlefield back. This just does a lot. Now, it's not a catch-all, to be fair. There are going to be some limitations on the instances where it's really going to have that high of an impact, but for a card that I know is going to lead to an unholy amount of blowouts in the future, Mystic Reversal is going to be that. Now, again, this isn't something that you could probably always run as a 3 of, probably more as a 2 of in a lot of lists, and it is an epic, which I think is very important, because this is now one of those cards that I think that every single Calm Legend is going to want some number of copies of, meaning it is going to run a little bit higher. So that's kind of the other reason why I want to call out this card in general, is because we know that all the Calm Legends are going to be very reactive in nature. This also combos very well with Sona, of course, because we're always going to have 4 runes available to us. And also notably, just as future sets roll out, right, this can in theory only go up in value because there's going to be more spells that you want to be countering, or stronger spells to take control of and counter by removing one of your opponent's units, right? So Mystic Reversal, I think, is definitely, out of all the cards that we're going to talk about today, is at least my pick for very curious to see where this lands. But also, again, I have to be very honest, I think it's going to be very annoying to be across the table from this one in particular, just of how good it could be. Like, nothing is going to feel worse than having a falling comet come your way and then just killing your opponent. Your opponent plays this and kills your unit as well, and you're just like, all right, well, I just wasted my entire turn and got taken over by a 4-cost spell. So again, I could probably make a whole video and just like when to hold this up, what cards you're going to combo with it, but just trust me from now at very first glance, this card is going to be a beast, to say the least. Now, in terms of what I'm more excited for, and just of how it changes a little bit of the battlefield holding dynamic, is Blitzcrank in passive. 5 energy, 1 power, 5 might, has the tank keyword, which is always nice. But when you play me to a battlefield, you may move an enemy unit to here. We know that there are quite a few Calm-based legends that are all about defending or going tall on a battlefield and holding it, right? So Blitzcrank is admittedly the exact card that you wanted, because as we had the reveal season up till now, there was a little bit of this getting stuck at a battlefield, and you and your opponent were just kind of staring at each other across the lands and not really interacting all that much with how tall that Calm could go, and you just let each other get points until you're trying to get that very last one, right? Well, now Blitzcrank just says, well, I'm going to yank you over to mine and chip away at your board, which then means I can either use something else at my base to go conquer that other battlefield, or, again, if we just, for heaven help us, we hold this, Blitzcrank comes back to our hand, we're just going to keep looping this every single turn. So in a lot of the Calm strategies that are all about going tall, being defensive, holding down a battlefield, Blitzcrank is exactly the card that you wanted at the end of the day, right? Of course, if you have the ganking battlefield, you can do a little bit there in terms of just going between battlefields, what have you, that's fine. But you know, in the 99% of instances where that's not one of the battlefield options and you need more of ways to break the board, I think when you combo Blitzcrank with, of course, Charm was kind of the already MVP spell for a lot of the Calm Legends, it's going to be really annoying to try to hold a battlefield against a Calm opponent, knowing that they're going to have so many ways to break your board, or if they're Leona, just stun your board, right, and then take you out that way. So I think Blitzcrank is a very welcomed addition here, just for, again, how Calm decks can play. And again, just being very annoying. It's flavorful, I'll give it that, but this is another card that I am terrified to be across the battlefield from. Now, it would be my biggest pick if it does work out the way it does, but at a knee-jerk reaction level, this card is either insanely busted and everything that top-end mind wanted, or it's just not going to find a home at all, is going to be Time Warp. So, welcome back, Time Walk, 10 energy for power. Take a turn after this one and then banish it. So this is great for holding a battlefield and automatically getting that point. But what's really important to note here is that in decks like Teemo that are lower power and can easily go up to 12 runes in this case, you can line this up by being at 12, recycling 4 back down to 8, channel 2 runes on your next turn, and then spoiler, you can loop another Time Warp, meaning you do have the potential to take back-to-back points out of nowhere that your opponent just really might not be able to do much about at the end of the day. So I am very curious to see where this lands in the Teemo list, and Lux primarily might have a chance to find room for this as well because it is more heavy top-end control, but just being able to get an immediate point for holding is incredibly strong. So this is one that we'll have to wait and see where the power cost aligned and who can really get the most value out of this. But again, I think if there is a deck that can capitalize on this and making sure that you're going immediately from 7 to 8, right, from the holding aspect of just getting to take an extra turn, it's going to be quite scary. But again, I think Mind really needed more help on the top end of kind of what it was looking like beyond just removal spells. And Time Warp is pretty sick. Admittedly, you know, having Mundo line up into a Time Warp is going to be quite difficult for your opponent to capture the battlefield because it's just going to be such a massive might unit. And this also goes into kind of what I want to say about the other card is Riptide Rex. Welcome back, buddy. 6 energy, 2 power, 6 might. When you play me, deal 6 to an enemy unit at a battlefield. Mind was all about having the Falling Comet or Singularity, but we didn't really have a lot of good mid-game bodies that we really wanted to play that could help us capture battlefields that, you know, weren't also like Kaisa, right, where you have to conquer a battlefield to really get the most use out of it. So Riptide Rex here is a very welcomed addition, but also important to note here is that it does give you the ability to use some of the other minusing might-based effects to have this damage extend out even further. Of course, could say the same about Falling Comet, what have you, but I do want to at least, you know, note here that if you hold that might-reducing spell, either for Riptide Rex or when he wants to be on defense, you're most likely going to take out 2 units with this guy, and that is pretty much everything that you wanted when you're trying to get back into the game with Mind being a little bit slower. So it's not flashy again by any means, but I think in terms of overall, very happy to see it. Riptide Rex is going to be the honorable mention here because it is just so good for rounding out, or I should say smoothing out the curve for some of those decks. Now, the domain that got the most annoying cards, if I thought I was upset at Mystic Reversal, which again, still think that's going to be like the overall top most played, Epic is going to cost the most, yada, yada, yada. We have Sabotage, a 1 energy, 1 power spell. Choose an opponent, they reveal their hand, choose a non-unit card from it, and recycle that card. God, it's Thoughtseize is back, and that's a Magic reference, but basically just anytime we have card information as well as ripping out probably the most important card from our opponent's hand, it's going to be good. Now we'll have to see if there is a slower body style of deck that wants this, or if it is just going to be all in on the sideboard style of plan. But either way, Sabotage is going to be an insane card. It does a lot in every other trading card game. And again, I think being a low enough cost means that you're just able to play this whenever you want in terms of lining it up on the correct turn of when your opponent might be holding either a key removal spell or a key buff spell that you just either need to conquer a battlefield or make sure that your guy sticks around. Think of this just as extra protection because you get to see your opponent's hand, know what their next couple turns are going to look like, and then can also just, if they're holding like a Vengeance or something, which spoiler we'll talk about later, you're going to say, sorry, you no longer get that premium removal, and now I'm clear to do whatever I want, right? Card is just absolute gas, don't need to spend too much time talking about. But for the other half of that, let's say that your opponent did get to play the spell and you thought that they were going to remove it. Well, no, because we have a 1 energy, 1 power, again, both very low costed, Unyielding Spirit, prevent all spell and ability damage this turn. It's not target, it just says all. Yeah, I'm surprised that this didn't just say, you know, protect a unit, right? Because we have things like the Ithcathian Rain that are going to try to either board wipe or get ahead on damage. And this 1 costed spell just says, I'm sorry, you don't get to do any of that, right? It's obviously good for Volibear's on attack. It's good for Anivia's on attack, for just to name some of the ability style effects. It just does a lot. So thankfully it's an uncommon. It'll be easy to get, and it's going to be in the sideboard for literally everybody domain using Legend, but it is something that when looking at the overall pool and having so many cards that were already kind of not as strong as we might like into set, we now just got a card that says, okay, well, instead of having to choose one thing that we're going to protect for the turn, I'm going to protect my entire buffed up board, and you're not going to be able to break it. So set stonks just continue to go up. I definitely think, I said before on record that set was top 3 before these spoilers today. And well, I definitely think set is remaining top 3 by the looks of it. Now going into Chaos, and this one might not be that exciting today, but it is Rebuke on a body, and anytime that we have that style of card, it usually turns out to be pretty good, but a 4 energy, 2 power, only 2 might, but that's fine. Unit, when you play me, return another unit to at a battlefield to its owner's hand. Now, the immediate thing for me that comes to mind, again, is going to be Teemo, because it can be difficult to recapture a battlefield at a time, and we are a lower power cost to deck, so we don't mind actually just paying 2 power for this, but we get to bounce something and then quickly just use one of our units to go retake the battlefield and play one of our hidden cards. Now, in general, I think this is obviously a big note of just being insane against things like Volibear, where you just bounce their big threat back to their hand to give you a bit more time, but this also may be used in other ways, where if we just really need another Riptide Rex, if we're playing like a blue and purple combination, you can just bounce Riptide Rex to your hand and then replay it, right? This just says any unit. So this sticks out to me because anytime we get something that allows us to reuse on-play effects, right? We talked about the portal card as well. It's always something you want to keep in mind of, because if there are extremely strong on-play effects, sometimes you just want to loop them, and this is one way to do that. Now, again, I do think from at least where it's going to be today, it's mostly going to be used as a more tempo-driven card of setting your opponent back, making sure that they are unable to hold that battlefield, they're not getting the points right, and just going to conquer it yourself. So there are some instances where previously people might have been playing Rebuke, they might use this as like a split, like a 2-2 split on Rebuke, just because sometimes the unit's going to be better, sometimes you don't hold up the reaction, what have you, right? But this does give us some more options for things like the Jinx deck if you just really wanted another body instead of being so spell heavy. So again, Bouncer, I think here being definitely a card that a lot of people are going to find ways to get the most value out of. And again, for future sets, again, I want to stress that this wasn't just all about set 1 meta, but also kind of where set 2 is going. I do think this card could see a lot of love by other special on-play effects, or just being lower to the ground bouncing if we get more of the go tall or late game style of Legends, that this can just be a very hard counter for. So very curious to see where this card goes. And okay, fine, I will cheat a little bit. You know, if you know me, I love seeing them back. That's all that there is. Welcome back, my Shadow Isle buddies. I've missed you so much. And one thing I will say as I was going through the spoilers is there definitely seems to be a Order and Chaos discard style of deck that we don't have the Legend for, but this just screams set to something to me. And I'm very excited because I love being able to play cards out of my trash, or like Rasa has the reduction of cost and being a 6 power. These are just cards that get me excited for future set design, because it very much says that we will get something, maybe a Legend that mills every turn, right? We're going to get something that helps fill up our graveyard that gives us more options to playing these style of cards. Now, I do want to stress that there are cards currently available that if we're just going through our deck normally, if we're playing a blue and purple style of deck, right, we are going to have ways that we're filling up our trash, and we are going to eventually have enough cards in our trash where playing Rasa for, well, free, you know, is still going to be good. Is it going to be good that much late game with only 6 might? We'll have to wait and see, but this does line up quite well of seeing other cards that we might want to get back out of our graveyard, right? We've seen this in the set leading up to the reveals leading up to now of we have other cards that care about our graveyard. So something is coming. I'm very excited to see what it's actually going to be. But again, I had to cheat a little bit and, you know, give a shout out to the Dredge package, as it were, that I'm 100% betting there's going to be a Legend in set 2 that supports this more officially, but we did get a couple more mill spells that go with this or self-discard that very excited for it. Now, lastly, we have Order, and we have the Peak, as it were, Peak Guardian, 6 energy, 1 power, 5 might. When you play me, buff me. Then, if I am at a battlefield, buff all other friendly units there. This is scary for a lot of reasons, but namely just the most obvious example that I'm going to give is Victor. Victor is all about being able to conquer a battlefield and then just throw a bunch of tokens on it, and then suddenly you can say, well, I'm going to play this big bomb and buff up all my tokens instead. And then suddenly your might just doubles on the battlefield. Now, important note here is that this can also work for more aggressive strategies if you go into Set or if you're in Darius too, that you just want to conquer the battlefield, slam a bunch of guys into it. And then if you really need to hold that last point, if you are going up to 7, right? Playing Peak Guardian onto a battlefield is not only going to give you another 6 might boost, but generally you probably had 3 or 4 other units that survived, attacked in, what have you, that could then all get an additional boost on top of that. So like we had with Draven as being a 10 might big body, solo holds up to that 8th point that you need. I do see Peak Guardian playing a very similar role in other decks, or maybe just is even an additional copy that says, I need to hold this battlefield and I'm going wide enough, so I'm just going to slam down this big 6, what it comes to be a 6 might body, and then getting an additional 4 or 5 might kind of across the board, right? I do think that this can have a home, quite nice of a home as well, but also just what I'm excited to see where else it lands, because again, in Set, if we just need to reapply all of our buffs, well, now we can just throw everything at a battlefield, play this guy, and say, well, all my guys are now rebuffed if I had to spend the buff for whatever reason. So very interesting card, and again, one that might not have an immediate home or maybe as a 1 or a 2 of, but could see a interesting spot in the future. And okay, fine, this last one's boring. I'm sorry, as I was just going through the order, I had to at least call it out. But if you watch my Proving Grounds video, we got a kill spell, and this is just the upgraded version of it. So 4 energy, 2 power, Vengeance, welcome back, straight up kill a unit. It's a staple. It's peak. Welcome back. There's not much more I need to say about it. Just being able to have straight removal is going to be insanely good in the meta and is a very welcomed card. Again, if we are seeing more super low to the ground decks, it can be a bit limited in that regard, but as we see more control go tall strategies, a well-timed Vengeance is just going to knock your opponent clean out for the turn. Right now, it doesn't have action timing or anything like that, so it is something that you have to use on your turn, which can limit it a little bit, but I think the card is still going to be strong enough that you are playing some number of this in your main deck and or sideboard. So with that, that is our final reveals for Riftbound. Definitely let me know what your favorite card from the over 70 cards revealed today, or I guess yesterday at the time of recording this was. But I'm very excited. We have the beginner series that we're going to go back to, going through all the legends, doing a starter list for every single one of them. And then hopefully after when I get back from Gen Con, because now next week is Full Metal Alchemist and Gundam releasing. And if you follow me on Twitter or saw my YouTube posts, I've just been doing a lot at the local level lately. Gen Con is coming up, and we will be at Gen Con, and I'll have some proxy decks on me. So if you want to hang out and play games, definitely just let me know. But otherwise, when we get back from Gen Con, lots more Riftbound content to come. So until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.